It's 9:08 on a Wednesday morning, and we're joined here in the studio by local resident, author, and someone I believe who has a bit of a split personality because he's often seen in a red suit with a beard posing as Santa Claus throughout Nevada City, Grass Valley. R.L. Cherry, good morning.
Good morning. How you doing, Mark?
Fine. How are you?
I can't complain. Can't complain. It's a little chilly, but not bad.
Yeah. Well, you just came out with your first novel, a mystery, Christmas Cracker, and I thought, well, is that about kind of a Southerner, a nice, tale about an Alabama sharecropper and Christmas time? But no, it's a mystery, and it's a mystery set in the British Isles. So question number one, why a mystery? And number two, why have it set in the British Isles?
Well, for one thing, I'm a big fan of mysteries. I've started reading Sherlock Holmes when I was in junior high, and then moved on to Dashiell Hammett and all that Raymond Chandler wonderful stuff and then the nickel drop, the great quote he has, and all this. So I've always been a fan of mysteries, both on the screen and also reading.
Who's the very best of that genre, do you think, in your opinion?
Well, I'm a big Dashiell Hammett fan. That's a great one. But Raymond Chandler's also fantastic. So it's sort of like neck and neck. Depends on my mood.
What about contemporary mystery writers?
I read a lot of them. I've read a lot of Parker, Woods, Stuart Woods, different people. I started reading some of the female detective ones, but that was only after I wrote Christmas Cracker, which has a female protagonist.
Right, your heroine is Morg
Mahoney.
Morg Mahoney, and her sidekick, her Watson.
Heather Pierce, yes.
So I interrupted you. Okay, so you talked a little bit about the genre, why you picked the genre, but why stage it in England, Northern England?
Well, I lived in the British Isles for 5 years. I've always been a bit of an Anglophile and Scotophile and Irophile, all that. I love all that. I lived on the Isle of Man for 5 years and experienced a little bit of the being a stranger in a strange land a bit, but they were very friendly, not that. But sometimes they'd put a phrase out there that you'd go, huh? And so it gave me the idea of, because I could not write, honestly, a British character. I'm not that good on the British character to do it in a way that someone who was from England wouldn't go, this is phony. So I wrote an American going over to England and solving a crime.
I got you. And the rest is history. That came out a couple of months ago?
Came out in July, yes.
And what was that like, the whole process of writing that book, and how long did that take from first inspiration to when it finally rolled off the presses and was ready to be picked up and held and read and those pages turned?
Well, I started the book actually in late 99 and wrote it into early 2000. I sent it off thought I'd edited it myself totally, and sent it off to a few places and had what I call the oxymoronic good rejections. How can rejections be good? They can't. But they had someone had handwritten notes saying, interesting, but right now it's not for me. After I set it aside.
Any suggestions on these rejections as to how you might improve it to where it might become interesting to them?
It's always look for the agents that are of your genre. That's very important. I sort of shotgunned it out there for a while. Learned a lot about that, but I don't have an agent. I'm doing self-publishing. I'm doing it through CreateSpace and on Amazon.com. You can actually have your books in the biggest bookstore in the world, Amazon, without an agent, and you get a lot more percentage of the profit.
Mm-hmm.
You're lucky to get maybe less than 10% yourself after the time the publisher and everybody handles it if you're doing it through a regular traditional publishing. But self-publishing does give you, like on Amazon, you get quite a bit of 65% of the profits.
But you're paying the publishing cost, whereas if you are going through a publisher, aren't they usually fronting that? They're paying the expenses to publish it and distribute it, and then you're taking whatever you get.
On Kindle, you don't pay any publishing costs. You put it out there. You send it to them, and of course you'll have to do your own cover work, or you'll have to have somebody do it. So you pay someone to do it, or a friend, or whatever. but there is no charge to put it in Kindle. And that is a hot thing right now, of course, is Kindle. Also, if you go through CreateSpace, it really isn't that much, and what you're doing is print on demand. So you're not printing up these and settling them out of your trunk like it used to be in the old days of self-publishing, where you get some publisher who was not very good, just doing the best he could with a few self-publishing books, and then you'd be handing them out yourself and trying to sell them in bookstores.
What are your and I hadn't planned on going here, but you mentioned you mentioned the name Kindle, and I'm curious, what's your feeling about things like Kindle versus paper and just the heft and the feel of a book?
I was a big fan of only printed page, and then a couple of years ago, my daughter bought me a Kindle. And it was funny because you were saying something about before Christmas, it was already wrapped and all that. And she mentioned, "Well, what do you think of Kindle?" I said, "I'm not. I want to feel the book in my hand." And so I almost destroyed the gift, but then I really got into it. And it's great because you can books that you might not want to keep. I keep all my books. I don't give away books. I just that way. So now if it's on a Kindle and I go, it wasn't very good, I can delete it. So. It's also because if you're traveling, I'll have maybe a half dozen books on my Kindle. Try carrying a half dozen books around with you all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it has its advantage. For history books, things like I'm going to use as reference, those I still only do in printed copy.
So what percentage of your reading is done via Kindle versus the old traditional way of the printed page?
Now, because of the fact that I've been traveling a bit lately, probably 70% Kindle.
Wow.
And like I said, it's easy. You don't need as much light. I can read it without my reading glasses.
Well, a buddy of mine does Kindle, and he says, what he likes about it is he can adjust the font size.
Exactly.
Now when it gets up to such, where there's only 5 words on a page,
right.
it takes a long time to get through a book, but still, I hear him on that. Well, let's get back to your book. Tell us a little bit, if you will, about your character and the plot, and just enough to titillate people, but not give it away.
Well, Morg she comes from a bit of a dysfunctional family, shall we say. She had a father and no mother, and the father was cold. Not abusive in physical or anything, but cold and distant. So she doesn't really have a good feeling about Christmas, and that's what sort of this is about. She goes over there with her friend Heather Pierce, who is so wealthy that she uses money for anything. I mean, she has no sense of money.
To light her cigars?
She doesn't smoke a cigar, but she would. She would. That's true. But she is also a person who has no friends, real friends. They're both sort of loners, and so they end up with each other. That's one of the early scenes. I won't go into that because it's sort of one of my fun scenes. A lot of tongue-in-cheek stuff there. So they get together and become friends more out of the fact that Morg saves her life, so to speak, and then also they're both outcasts. And Morg is very bright. She has a degree in humanities. However, there was nothing to do. Like she said, what could you do with a degree in humanities? You can flip hamburgers at McDonald's, So she ends up with a friend of her father going into this business, and then it becomes hers. So that's why she is an investigator. She's very sharp. She's very well read, but also she does have a bit of an acid tongue.
She's got an attitude. She's got an attitude.
Oh yes, she does, definitely. And if you don't like a strong woman character who has a bit of a sarcastic nature, then you probably wouldn't like Morg.